Everybody come from a different place. Everybody's at a different place in life. And if you don't understand that, you really don't need to be part of the conversation. And we're talking different spectrums, people from different walks of life, people that are pushing for a different thing in life. And so trying to get everybody to come together from different walks of life and figure something out, that's community. Because we wasn't all raised the same. We didn't all have the same parents. We didn't all have the same incomes. So, but we've got to respect each other when we're having any of those conversations. And if you don't go in with an open mind and respect for somebody else, that's where we start losing it and things start going backwards.
You're listening to The Underview, an exploration in the shaping of our place. My name is Mike Rush, and today I have the privilege to talk with Wes Evans. Wes and his family have their roots in dairy farming. However, today they own and operate the Evans Family Farm. It's a beef cattle farm in western Benton County, Heifel to be exact. Farming has been in their family's way of life for generations, and their future is definitely invested in it. Wes is also the president of the Benton County Farm Bureau, which also places him at the center of how our region's farm families are facing the challenges of growth here in Northwest Arkansas. I wanted to talk to Wes for three reasons. First, as we examine the growth of Northwest Arkansas, cities and more people are expanding into county land and changing these communities. Wes sees the impact every day, and I want to hear what his perspective is. Second, as the Benton County Farm Bureau president, Wes has a wide view of how these things are impacting more than just his family, but an entire county, and so he's actively working to chart a path forward to help solve these challenges for so many. And then third, in the continuation of our conversation with Andy Chasteen, Wes is seeing firsthand how the Arkansas Rural Recreational Roads initiative is impacting our relationships between urban and rural communities. I want to understand the other side of this conversation. And so, for my discussion with Wes, he loaded me up in his diesel truck and gave me a firsthand tour of his community and some of its stories. The audio may have a few tricky spots because that's where the diesel engine roars a little bit. And you may want to have the episode webpage handy as I've posted pictures of our tour to help give some visuals. All right, it's time to get started. We're going to load up in the truck and Wes is going to give us a tour of his neighborhood.
My name is Wes Evans. We are out at our family farm out in Heifel, Arkansas. And Heifel's kind of west of what we would consider the rural Northwest Arkansas. Just going to drive around and look at a few spots that have been impacted by the growth that's moving into Northwest Arkansas and see if we can paint a picture of what we deal with every day on the country and what farmers deal with all the urban sprawl. I don't think I've ever recorded from inside a diesel truck. We can shut it off whenever we get through.
No, this is what makes it. This is like real stuff. No,
Could have brought the limo, but it's
yeah.
slaughter.
Now you may have to charge me for that trip.
This is humorous. This is actually my wife's family owns this land right here. And when they built chicken houses, they actually was mad about it because all the extra runoffs from the chicken houses. Now, I think they wish that more chicken houses was around.
Why is that?
To keep people away.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your family and what I think one of the questions, like I always ask people, like, what does Arkansas mean to you?
I was raised on a dairy farm and right in Vaughn, Arkansas, and we never went anywhere. And when I say anywhere, I don't mean just like out of state. We never left the 20-mile radius of that area because we just had to stay on the farm the entire time. Honestly, as I got older and actually started exploring out a little more and going and doing stuff with my own family, I started actually appreciating more of what Arkansas had to offer in the Ozark Mountains and even getting down south and the different farms. What else is out there? Because all I really knew is home. was Northwest Arkansas. And this is where we always was. And this is where we always stayed. If it wasn't here, we wasn't there. But as far as appreciating what Arkansas has to offer from what other people come in here and like, I really didn't see a lot of that as a kid, honestly. I feel like I was just cooped up in my own little world. So it's obviously changed a little bit, but it's always been a rural area. Everybody here was farmers and around agriculture. Honestly, very few people even worked in town, when I was a kid. So, times have sure changed here.
Is it fair to call you a farmer? How would you describe yourself?
So yeah, we make the majority of our income from the farm. Farms changed over the years, and very few farms can actually, especially farmers my age, can do it all with just farming. Agriculture itself, it's just a lot different. Like right now, we're driving by some poultry houses. We'd call these complexes. And for a long time in Northwest Arkansas, this would be the only way that you could completely make a living. It still is the only way you can make a living as a farmer without an additional income or having a spouse that works in town. These farms right here, they're going to raise, just to give you the size and what they're doing, they're 66 foot wide by 600 foot long. And they will raise, there should be 250,000 birds in these houses, in this one complex. Yeah. So there'll be roughly about 250,000 birds, and they'll raise about 4 flocks a year. So roughly producing 1 million birds a year. And if you notice, there's one on our right, there's one on our left, and there's 2 more coming up right here on the road. So we're literally going half a mile down the road and looking at four major poultry complexes. So we're looking at basically with those complexes, they're producing about 16 million a year, just to grasp what that looks like. That's a lot of birds. And I actually think the Simmons plant in western Benton County is actually processing like 10 million pounds of processed bird a week. So this is a huge industry for agriculture in this area. And the interesting part of this is we're fixing to come up just to get a picture of this, we've got a complex on our left, a complex on our right. Right in front of us is a subdivision going in with larger lots. I think they're probably 3-acre lots, and a bicyclist. But the thing about that is when people move out here, they tend to ignore what they're driving by. They'll see these chicken houses. These are newer houses. I think they look presentable for what the amount of production that goes out of them. But there's also cows all around them. They are spread out. It doesn't look terrible, but there's days whenever they start hauling birds out of here or feed trucks coming in. There's a feed truck right there actually going in. So you got the semi traffic, you've got litter. When the litter's being spread out here, it's going to stink. So there's a lot of traffic and a lot of things going on out here. This is production agriculture in Northwest Arkansas, and this is what it looks like. So just to paint a picture of what's going on right in front of us, and they've got this field right here flagged off.
Sorry, just for clarification. So we're on Peterson Road. Is that correct?
That's
and
it.
You're saying that this to the northwest corner here.
This is also, they're splitting off in lots. And so basically whenever they started doing this and the farmer heard what they was doing, of course, obviously they worry about what's coming in, how many people there's going to be, because he understands they may have came out at a good time where there wasn't any smell, there wasn't anything going on. And with all that going on, he decided to put up a sign to make sure that they understand. And that the sign says, notice this property is a farm. Farms have animals make funny sounds, smell bad, make babies outdoors, and have flies. Unless you can tolerate the above, don't buy a property next to a farm.
Seems like a fair enough notice.
Hey, if they want to ignore it, they can't ignore that.
So can I maybe ask about this? Because you've got a developer, I'm assuming, who's bought this, probably, I don't know if they're from the area or not, across from this farm here. And nothing, I don't know if it's fair to say nothing's been done, but nothing's been built yet. There's no new people here.
Oh, there actually is.
Are there? Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah,
see it over there.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we see the first kind of houses going up, but it feels like you're starting from a point of almost tension. Or conflict? Is that a fair assessment?
I guess it's just hard for farmers to understand why people would want to live. The farmers have to live next to the chicken farms. As the old joke goes with dairy farmers and chicken farmers, the bad smells is just the smell of money. There's zero benefit to these people over here other than eating chicken nuggets. They just understand the negative effects that these people are going to have to deal with. And the farmers understand that. They understand this isn't just all beautiful and everything. This is production agriculture. And so they just want to make sure that they understand, because what will happen is people will come out here and they'll buy these houses and think they're moving out of the country, but then they want to start changing what these farmers are doing. This farmer right here, they've owned this farm. Oh man, they've owned it my entire life. So they've owned it for over 40 years, maybe longer than that. And his son runs the farm too. It's a father-son operation, and they're planning on their kids staying on the farm a little bit and still running the operation. So it is a cool operation. The cattle they have out here, they actually sell their seed stock operation, but they also have some storefronts and everything for their beef. So it's a very unique farm, and it's actually a beautiful farm. They keep it up very nice and everything, but they just want everybody to understand that is moving out here, what they're going to have to deal with.
You mentioned this real quickly, but you're saying like the people moving in here at some point are going to expect this farm to change.
They are. Just for example, those houses, the chicken houses, I think that complex itself was probably one of the first ones put in here, and that would have been 8 to 10 years ago. I think the lifespan for those chicken houses are meant to be about 25 years. I think they're starting to think they could expect to get 35 to 40 years out of them. It's not going away. And they're going to be here just because the urban sprawl happens and land prices get really high. The amount of money that these produce and the amount of debt that some of these farmers have, they have to continue to keep farming, keep trying to get up on top of it. And very small percentage of these farms are actually paid for. So they have to continue to produce. And the amount of money it costs to build a complex like this it's millions of dollars. And so it's not just a little small family operation. It's a lot bigger than what people actually drive by and think about something like that would be. So
we're in county property right here.
Right here is county. Yes.
At some point, it looks like they could put 100 houses over here to the left, maybe 50. I don't know. At some point, though, I don't know if it's fair to say there might be 50 people that live here. Do those 50 voices become more important to the county than this one that's been here for as long as you can remember?
Sadly enough, a lot of that has to do with our elected officials.
Okay. You want to talk about that?
And it's a conversation I actually had with the county judge last week. He's been very good to agriculture in Benton County,
right,
and understanding the rural aspects of everything. And he actually gave us a heads up, like Quorum Court, we're fixing to lose a member of the Quorum Court that's been very instrumental for agriculture. She's been a farmer. Her family's got a century farm, and she's been a great ally. And he was just letting us know, hey, the times are changing, and on the Quorum Court, we're not going to have near the agriculture following that we had in the past. Yeah, these farmers need to start really paying attention to that and trying to get more people involved in politics, 100%. But farmers are very limited on their time.
Yeah.
And meetings typically don't make farm payments. So it's there's been a few of us take a lot of initiative and try to make sure that we have people on our side and informing the general public on what's going on out here and making sure that we're taken care of. But, at the end of the day, it's all in who we got sitting in those seats. And I'll show you some more. We'll just go around the block and come back.
Go around. Your block's a lot different than my block.
This is a big block.
This is a big block.
Yeah. My dad actually he grew up just on the other side of this property right here. Actually, we can go that direction.
What's your earliest memory of this place? You have one?
Man, I got a lot of memories.
Maybe one that you can tell me. You won't get in trouble with.
I'll tell you, like in high school, these was my roads. This is dirt roads. I could go anywhere. I could go anywhere in the United States of America on a dirt road back then. It seemed like I was good at getting there. But when I was a kid, oddly enough, we moved from the place my grandpa grew up on, or my place my dad grew up on, right up here. And it was a 60-acre farm. And we was actually moving to the dairy farm I grew up on. And I was probably about 4 years old. And I was in the back of a pickup truck, and we was moving lawn furniture, and I was sitting on the lawn furniture, and my mom made the corner up here on the paved road, and I fell out of the truck and bumped my head, and I haven't been right since.
The whole world may hear that at this point, but or 10 people, I don't know, but
But right here, you can see all the flags. These are all separated off into small lots for houses. And once again, we're a quarter of a mile away from the chicken complex right here. And this is a beautiful area. Don't get me wrong. You're at this point, you're far enough away that I feel like you could probably get away. The production of agriculture is not going to affect, right, your outdoor barbecue. Over there where we was at earlier, I could only imagine having a Super Bowl party or something, or a 4th of July party, and then be selling chickens, and the aggravation that would be. But that farm was there, obviously, long time before the houses are. So this right here is actually the farm my dad grew up on. So I was actually born here. We had a chicken farm here. We milked Class C dairy farm here actually years ago, a grade C. So we farmed a lot of that. We leased a lot of this property even after that. It got split up as the family my grandfather passed away when my dad was 18. So that kind of got split up a little bit. My grandmother actually still lives on part of the place. And that's the going story for a lot of land out here. The big farms that was always there. As the kids get older or as it's passed down, most of them get split up. But even if it's just split up in the siblings, it still gets split up, and then the grandkids. And so these bigger farms are just getting smaller and smaller as we go.
not to sound doom and gloom, but when you don't get those back, those are gone forever at that point, aren't they?
They are. You can try. I say you don't get it back. Me and my wife, we're in our late 30s. We've actually accumulated 100 acres. 103 acres is what we actually own. And my grandmother actually gave us 5 acres. So we've had 5 acres given to us. And other than that, my only inheritance I've ever got was $300 from my great grandma. And I bought a rocking chair with it. It hasn't been really per se inherited at all. None of it has been. My dad was the same way. He bought this farm over here and raised us on it. It was a struggle. We grew up with, I remember when I was 16, my parents didn't have a truck worth driving to town, and they had to borrow mine. There's deer right there. But he had that 80 acres. We leased a bunch of land. So just because we had 80 acres, we were still farming probably close to 800 acres or maybe more, probably about 800 acres then. But we had the dairy farm. We was only milking about 50 head, and we had about 50 head of mama cows, beef cows. From there, and when stuff was moving out to him, sewer came in, he actually sold this place and bought farther out. And from there, he bought 120 acres. And then he started as he could. He bought a little more and a little more and a little more. So basically, he's almost a self-made man as far as building his own farm up also. And he owns 500 acres, a little farther south, a little farther out of town. And it's moving in on him. There's some subdivisions within a mile of where his farm starts. And it's definitely moving in, but the times of starting a farm from nothing and building a big farm, really, there's no way to ever make that happen unless it's what we would call either an investment farm where somebody has a nice job in town and they need to dump some money and get some good tax write-offs. We have a lot of farmers out here right now that they don't make their living off the farm. As far as income goes, they're not banking on the farm for income, which they get to farm with money. And I've always had to farm to make money. And it's a little different thing. So you'll see some of that where people's actually built some farms up like that. But for the most part, those times are definitely over. We've got land out this particular area, which, like I said, is just west of the major Northwest Arkansas. It's going anywhere from 20 to 60,000 an acre.
I talked to Benton County Judge Mooring. One of his quotes was, "It's getting harder to be a farmer because of the opportunity costs that you're passing up." At what point does this land become so valuable that you almost can't say no? Does that happen?
It does. And everybody's at a different stage in their farming careers or in their lives. For me, it's been a struggle. We've owned our own farm now for probably 15 years that we've really worked hard to try to get it all going. And it's been a struggle the entire time to make the payments, keep the cows fed. And then we worry about our own family. Whenever somebody starts flashing money in front of you, you have to make that decision. Like, do we move on? Do we move somewhere else and buy a bigger farm? But for the most part, that's what happens, is even though these farms go out, if it's somebody who's still on fire about agriculture, they'll just move out and buy a bigger farm. The other thing is the guys that's hot, heavy, fully invested, everything's rolling good. A lot of these poultry farms, they don't want to move. They don't want to sell. They want to continue on. Then you've got guys who literally farm their entire lives, and honestly, the farm is their retirement. And so I never, ever fault anybody for wanting to sell out and move on. You got to realize too, a lot of these older farmers, and people's asking, why are they selling? This is where it gets deep, because if they had kids, that farm wasn't big enough to make a living for their family and their kids' family. The next generation just could not make a living on that farm. So they had to go to town and get a job to raise their own families. Well, as soon as that happens, you start separating farther and farther from the farm. So sometimes they still work on the farm until they end up retiring and taking the farm over. A lot of times they go to town. They don't have a lot to do with the farm. If they ever do come back to the farm, they don't have the skills and knowledge it takes to actually manage that farm, and it'll actually go backwards. And so you have to remember that aspect. If there's not somebody to turn the farm over to, and people start flashing enough money that you don't have to worry about making it to your grave anymore, I'm proud of those people. They're finally getting to retire. They've worked hard their entire lives to honestly finally say that they made it. And that's one different aspect of it. And everybody's at a different point in their life, no matter if you're a farmer or you work in town. And that's where we're at right here. We're actually sitting on the road. This is the farm I grew up on.
Doesn't look like a farm anymore.
Those two big pine trees was in the front yard of the old house that was built in the 1890s. And you can still see the old driveway right here. For anybody listening, there's privacy fences, and there's what we call spec homes. And it was an 80-acre farm, and now it houses 200 spec homes. So this was a dairy farm. The driveway was right there, back straight into the corral. There was a 100-year-old house next to it, and old block dairy farm or dairy barn. That's where I grew up from the time I was 4 years old to the time I was probably 22 years old. Grew up there. I ended up marrying my high school sweetheart that also grew up on a dairy farm out farther west of Benton County. And she actually milked cows here to pay our rent on that old 100-year-old house, and from my parents. And I milked on the weekends. She went through nursing school, and I went through machine tool technology and automated machine tool technology school. So we worked our way through school on the dairy farm. And then after that, we went to town and got jobs. That was about the same time my parents sold this farm. But they sold 80 acres. And like I said, now at the time, we thought that was a bunch of money. That they obviously was a fraction, because that would have been sold in roughly about 2004, 2005.
How do you even sum up words to describe that transition? It's literally right in front of your eyes.
I've heard people say that. They say, man, does it not hurt driving by there and having all those memories on? But man, it's so different than it was when I grew up.
So I would assume it's unrecognizable other than the driveway part.
Yeah, 100%. There's those two big trees, about all that's left of what you can tell. After that, after it's sold, they came in and actually made the subdivision, the roads out and everything. And then that's when all the bust happened. So for a lot of years, I'd drive by and there was just roads out here with no houses at all. I'm glad they finally did something with it, because it was sad to see all that land not being used for what they bought it for. And honestly, that was one of the nicer farms in Benton County, lots of topsoil. As far as agriculture goes, you can't get a better farm in Benton County. And we actually, years ago, we leased this property across the road from here, which is another 80 acres. It's still, if you drive by, it looks like it's agriculture. It actually just sold. I'm assuming it's probably all going to be houses too, because Caddy Corner, there's 400, 500 more houses.
Yeah, it's the only place that doesn't have a house on it that
Yeah,
I can see at the moment.
And the crazy part about this is actually in the city limits of Heifel. And I think at the time when this went in, Heifel was probably running about a population of 370. When you talk about a population of 370 and they come in here and build 248 houses, then they turned right around and built these 400 across the deal. You literally astronomical numbers compared to what it was. So the major of the population in the city of Heifel is all right here. Heifel's still a very rural area, very rural community, but it's crazy. The reason for that is because there's sewer right here. And this is actually, a lot of these people don't even realize they live in Heifel. They think they live in Bentonville because it's just so far north of that town that the town's really big, but a lot of land. And so it almost feels completely separated from the rest of the town.
So yeah, you've seen all of this change right before your eyes.
So, yeah. Lots and lots of changes. It's not just here. This is the story all over. That Centerton has had this going on for years and years. It's just moved a little bit farther out,
I never thought about it that way. Heifel has 300 people, got 2 subdivisions with about that, 3 subdivisions going in there almost. You triple, double the size of the town.
Yeah, I don't know I would throw out probably an average of 3 people per home.
Yeah.
So you literally looked at 750 population jump.
And so
just off of that.
What I'm really curious, and I don't know how you would summarize this other than just how you feel about it, which is, I think, totally fair. Like, does it feel like the people that have moved in there bring with them a different, I dare say, value set or a way of making decisions or different priorities or a different way of looking at life?
Yeah, they are. It's a completely different way of living than the rest of Heifel's ever had. But I'm going to tell you, every one of those houses will have a privacy fence around it, and they're confined to their area in that privacy fence. And what I've noticed is those people tend to focus on their little area and not the rest of the area. It's hard to explain. They don't tend to get involved with city politics as much. They do their own thing, and like I said, I don't even know if they know they live in the city for the most part until they probably go to vote, and they don't know anybody on the ballot. But and that's another aspect of city politics is Heifel's always had, there's the families, the old families, that's the grandkids of people who's lived there forever. So the dynamic of the town, everybody knew everybody. And so now a lot of times I hate to say it, but I'll go to vote and there'll be a name on there that's not the normal 10 families that's always lived in Heifel. And it forces you to do a little more research because you don't know everybody like you used to. I was showing you that earlier. I mean, I've always lived a quarter of a mile away from somebody else. And so I've never really had a close neighbor. It's a 10-minute walk to your neighbor's house. And so it's tough for somebody like me to really grasp a hold of the reality of the way things are now, and the type of people that are out here now.
What would you, if you could talk to everybody that's maybe moving out here or has moved out here in one of these kind of subdivisions, what would you want them to know? What would you tell them?
Well,
what would you ask of them? Maybe is a fair question too.
What's the saying? When in Rome, there's the Romans. If a lot of it is, this stuff's been going on out here for years, generations, and it's how we make our living. And we've done it for a long time. Don't move somewhere else that you're not familiar with and think you're going to change somebody. Because I'm going to tell you, we're adapting the best we can. And I feel like we're making leaps and bounds. I've actually been a major part of the cycling and the rural roads campaign. And a lot of that has to do with I've given up on us stopping the growth. You can't stop it. It's coming. Northwest Arkansas is a great area to live. People realize that. We kept that a secret for a lot of years. It's not a secret no more. So I've transitioned and changed the mindset of trying to educate people of what they're seeing out here, what they're dealing with, farmers on the road. This is actually my grandmother's place. I run cattle on it. Right now it's muddy. When I pull out here in the road, I track mud all down this road the whole time. That's what you're going to see. You're going to see me taking up half the road or more just to pull into that gate back there so I could get out there to feed my cows. And on some of my cows, some of them look good. They're nice, beautiful cows. Then others are getting old and finding the end of their lifespan. Probably should have went to the sale barn last spring or last fall, but there's got a calf on their side, and I've got to let them raise that calf before I can go ahead and take them in. And so that's just part of it. And we know that cow's old. We know that cow looks like she's hurting walking across there, but there's a reason why we still have her out there. It's not just because we're mean and we're neglecting our animals. If I was to take her to the sale barn, then I've got a calf without a mama out there, that's going to cost me money, but it's also that calf's going to suffer for months and months. And right here, a lot of this land over this is all going to be, it's accessible to sewer. It's flat land. We got slight slope. It'll drain off good. It's subdivision. It's prime land for subdivisions. And it's actually under contract for a subdivision. Beautiful land the way that it is. Yeah. And I'm going to stop here in the road and explain a little bit of this. So
Tell me where we are on what road.
We're actually in Highfield, northwest of Highfield a little bit. Okay. And what we've got here is it's an entire city block of agriculture. And it's nice, beautiful. You can see all the way across it. You can see the highway over there and that highway is 3/4 mile away. As far as any buildings on it, we're talking about an entire block of 400 acres that's got 6 buildings on it or something like that. So very bare. Actually, honestly, whenever development comes in, it's not going to affect very many people. As far as landowners go on this block, there's probably only 4 or 5 landowners on this entire city block. One majority landowner. So what we deal with, and I mentioned it earlier, with people in subdivisions that kind of mind their own business and kind of stay in what's in their yard is theirs. And the other mentality of people moving out is the 3 to 5 acre tracts, the 20 acre tracts, which are beautiful. Nice big yards, keep them up. But the mentality of people are a little different that do that. They'll buy the larger yards and they'll build a house for the view. But the problem is they don't own it. They only own 20 acres. Out here, you can see, we're sitting here right here. We can literally see 1,000 acres. It's flat. There's very few trees. And we're looking at 2 very nice homes. But if you look at them, they're overlooking somebody else's property. And the problem with that is whenever the farmer decides to change their view from their kitchen window, it gets under their skin. And I agree. I understand. Nobody likes change. But the biggest thing I think for people moving out here is you can basically only control what you own. Now you have a voice and you can go speak your voice to the planning commission or the city council or whatever. But at the end of the day, you can only control what you own. And so out here, it's a growing area. The farmers next to you are all in different aspects of their lives. The farmer that's here is in his mid to upper 70s. This is a lot of land for him to maintain. So he's at a retirement age. He wants to go travel and go see the world that's not the place he's lived and worked for the last 70 years. And hey, congratulations. He finally gets to retire and take it easy. But there's been a lot of backlash from the people that's overlooking that. It's going to change their aspects, but they don't even realize they've changed his. If you notice the trees that's planted on the fence row right there, he sprays this. There's no weeds. He can't spray his fence row anymore, or even close to it, because he doesn't want to kill their trees. Every neighbor's affecting every neighbor out here. And so you have to take that into County. Anything you do is going to change what your neighbor may have to do. So that's the biggest thing to understand when you're moving into a rural area. And I'm not trying to look at all the negatives. My parents have sold some little pieces of land to some neighbors that have turned out to be friends of the family that's part of the family. And they'll come over and borrow equipment, or they'll come over and help us with a fence or something like that. We've made some great neighbors doing that. And for the most part, that's what we're looking for. I can take you and show you a few places that's a prime example of positives that has happened with that. But for the most part, nobody talks about the positives. They talk about the negatives.
Sure.
And that's just part of our society, I think. But
so if we are sitting here 10 years from now, what would we see?
if the growth continues in Northwest Arkansas, I'll just say where we're sitting right now, if the contract fills itself, there's probably going to be 1,500 homes built right here.
Oh, wow.
And we're not talking 10 years. We're talking 5 years, 3 years, 3 to 5 years. They're going to be concentrated. I think the plans for that actually has commercial in the front, has some multifamily homes behind that, like basically built for a supermarket, multifamily homes, and it condenses out, and parks and everything like that. I know there's some stuff going on closer to Bentonville that they're building entire communities. They're building restaurants, housing. That's another thing. Whenever companies come in to do that, it's almost nice for the cities, in my opinion, because they're dealing with one engineer doing the entire scope of it. They're dealing with one construction company, one dirt work company. Whenever you're developing 20-acre lots, that's a whole nother room of people that our inspectors have to watch and have to keep up with. These big land grabs like this for a municipality, in my opinion, would be a dream come true. But
Probably, checks all the boxes with tax revenue, planning, ease, growth.
I know a lot of these companies too are actually coming in, and they're trying to help the municipalities get up on top of the stuff that they need to be getting done, catch up on sewer and water lines and everything else. And they have to. These municipalities are so far behind on making sure everything's ready for this. We're fixing to see, we have seen growth that's actually unhealthy for an area. And the stress of a lot of these council members and planning, there's a lot going on. I'm glad I'm not in their shoes. And everybody's going to point their finger whenever it doesn't work out. So
What do you mean by that?
that they're sitting on a pedestal. If they mess up, everybody's going to notice.
Yeah.
If it all goes right, very little praises.
It's hard to imagine sitting here today that 5 years from now, there could be 1,500 houses here. And yet I shouldn't be surprised at all. But to see that through your eyes and try to picture how this place is changing, it's abrupt, I guess. Maybe that's not even the right word. It's a stark. It wakes you up a little bit on what growth looks like.
It does. Where does it stop? I'm sure you've traveled to Phoenix or Houston and seen how big, how spread out those areas are. We're not flat like Houston. We are right here. Houston's it was a blank canvas. They didn't have to really focus on.
Probably could have looked like this.
Yeah.
Way, shape, or form.
As much as it's about time to start stacking people on top of people. You got to start building up instead of building out, because there's not a lot of flat ground like this left. And so I guess time will tell. I know my kids will definitely see some major changes. I've lived here for 40 years. The changes I've seen, it's just going back 5 years, thinking about the different things. I remember as a kid, we would go to Tulsa or Fayetteville to go shopping. Now it's right here. I used to know the number of Walmarts I lived 20 minutes from, and I just quit keeping track. There's so many neighborhood markets and Walmarts just from right here. And so I guess I can see why it would grow. For the most part, we've dealt with, like we talked about before, about the cyclists. They love this area. They love getting out here and seeing things. And we've gone a long ways with them. And they've been out to the house, and you start finding that common ground and trying to understand each person's lifestyle. If everybody just goes at it with an open mind and we can work through our problems, I think that's the biggest thing. not throw a hissy fit when things don't go your way or something's getting built that you don't like to see. We just need to try to get a hold of the right people and try to get in their heads of how we would like to see Northwest Arkansas grow in the future.
Yeah, I don't know if this is encouraging. You probably know all of this, but it's like I had a lot of conversations with city planners and density. They are talking density, that they've got to get density versus sprawl. They've got to get that under control in some way, shape, or form. I'm not a developer, so I don't understand the economics of density versus coming out here and putting a big tract of homes down. I guess for whatever it's worth, I do hear from the city planners we've talked to, especially as a part of these conversations, that density is a goal. And it's such an interesting perspective listening to you, because you're talking about density out here. I live in downtown Bentonville, and there's people that live on a 1/4 acre lot who don't want any more density than that.
Yeah.
And it's probably not a fair comparison, but in some ways it feels like there is a common thread of trying to make sure that, or it's a common thread that change is happening. And by default, it can be a really scary thing for a lot of people involved. And yeah, I'm learning a lot, to say the least.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I would really be interested to know, have you talked to many people about industry coming to Northwest Arkansas? Because I feel like it's mainly houses and storage buildings.
Yeah.
Or warehouse.
Car
Car
washes.
washes.
Yeah.
But it's that part of it. I keep thinking of other areas or big cities. They've got really good rail systems and industry. And I feel like we're lacking there.
Yeah. I had a conversation with Nelson Peacock. He's the president and CEO of the Northwest Arkansas Council, and that was started by Sam Walton and JB Hunt and Mr. Simmons and Tyson's. And they were the ones that were responsible for Airport 540. And he mentioned that these are Fortune 500 companies. They've reached their scale, and they're going to roughly employ the same amount of people 5 years from now, 10 years from now that they do today. And that the need is to bring in more industry and entrepreneurs who can grow their companies from these places. And so I know at certain levels of planning and economic development that people are focusing on that, but how you do that at scale, or how you do that, or what that kind of looks like is a whole conversation. That's probably way outside of my pay grade. But I do hear that as a priority. I don't know how big of a conversation that is at a city level, if that makes sense. I don't know if that helps or not, but
See what they're doing.
yeah, I was about to say, are they just going to come look at the cows? Are they neighbors or
the eagle's nest right there?
Oh, yeah. Now I see it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big old nest.
It is. Yeah. I haven't seen them actually nest in it.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't have seen that unless you pointed that out.
Yeah. It's
like got their binoculars. Now I was out on Sugar Creek area and I didn't see it happen, but I don't have any other explanation than this eagle took down a little baby deer and was sitting in the middle of the field just eating it. And the little mom and its 2 little brothers and sisters were there watching it. But
So actually the reason why those eagles ever started there, he brings all of his cows in here and calves them out right here on this 80 acres. So when you do that, I mean, we're talking 400 head of cows, and they all calve within, this time, which is a lot of eagles. This is where they'll come and you'll start seeing them more. But all the afterbirths, or if there's a dead,
I guess that makes sense.
If there's a dead calf, they'll get to eat on that. So that's what really happens. My wife actually grew up next to the Eagles Watch over on the other side of Gentry. And that was before the EPA got after chicken farmers or started working with them on composting and incinerating. Okay. And eagles actually, that's what they was actually coming for, was to feast on the dead chickens.
Makes sense.
So, I mean, they're America's vultures, basically. They're beautiful, but they've got to eat too. But
they got to eat what they got to.
Yeah, sure.
So this was a little trip around the block for you, yeah?
Yeah, we just tour where I grew up, where I live.
So I'd love just an overview of kind of like your role with the Farm Bureau for the
county. So I'm actually the county president.
Okay.
So yeah, we Farm Bureau is basically split up into two different. We got a foundation. We have an insurance. The actual board is made up of a lot of farmers, some businessmen in the area, but we basically, and we do manage the budget, everything like that for our local insurance. But for the most part, we are advocates for agriculture. We deal with a lot of writing resolutions to get to the state, to try to get in front of our politicians, to try to make the necessary changes to help with agriculture. And we do a lot of community work, a lot of stuff for our youth in agriculture. We actually have a women's committee that's Benton County's. We're very fortunate. We're very active. But I think last week they went to the Ronald McDonald House and did dinner down there for them. They supply a lot of stuff for our local pantries. Starting next week. So, there's a lot of stuff that we do for the community and for our local fair, our county fair. We're very instrumental in that. But yeah, it's amazing. We've got into the whole, when I got into it, I didn't realize how much stuff we actually did, how much stuff we actually accomplished, and how political it can actually get at like the state level. Actually, in March, I'm going to Washington. They're sending me to Washington, D.C. to meet with some legislators.
Oh, wow.
And some lobbyists up there. It's been great for our entire family. My kids are involved with a lot of stuff. It gets them good with the community and activities. But yeah.
Tell me how DC goes. That's a little different than out here around the block.
That's what I talked about it earlier, making fun of when I was a kid. I never went anywhere. I grew up and I still don't really like to go anywhere. And when they asked me to go, I asked, so do I have to get on the airplane? Yeah. Like, usually I'm a pretty good broad fella. But usually I got my wife, she's half size and I'm 1.5 size. So we work good on airplane seats together. But yeah, no, it's going to be an experience getting off the farm and going to that. We go to Little Rock quite a bit for meetings, and we got commodity meetings down there for different commodities for agriculture within the state. And Arkansas's largest in rice. Our beef production in Benton County is actually, we may not be the highest now, but for a while we was the largest in beef production, the second largest in poultry production, and I think we're still the largest in dairy production. As odd as it sounds for a lot of people that's moving in here, we are still a very large agricultural county in the state. And so we're very active when it comes to the state levels and making sure our voices are heard. And a lot of that actually comes to when we get down there at the state level. A lot of them look for us because a lot of the water runoffs, we deal with a lot of that here. So we try to work with that. And that's one thing that we didn't touch on earlier. I've got a rent farm. I've probably lost 2 or 3 acres off of the Osage Creek. And all that's mainly the upstream building that's going on. Illinois watershed, they're working hard trying to get a lot of that taken care of. That's something we're really focused on and trying to figure something out. I don't mean to point fingers, because I do feel like a lot of the developers, they're going by the book, but the book really just needs to be relooked at and see the kind of things we can do to make that better. I was actually, speaking of Farm Bureau and stuff we do, I actually went to a hypoxia meeting the other day. And so we met with a lot of the local sewer facilities, wastewater facilities, and trying to see how that's all played out. And people came from all over the country. So I met with some people from Indiana and Nebraska and Illinois. And I never really thought about it, but I had a lady from Illinois asking me, she said, so why are you guys so far ahead of everybody else on this? I never thought we was.
Interesting.
And all I've heard is how much better we need to do. But my answer to her is we've had the Illinois watershed. We've had the Spavinal watershed. They've been watching farmers for the last 20 years or 30 years. I think Spavinal's probably 30 and Illinois is probably 20. When you really think about it, farmers are really doing more for environment, of trying to have less of an impact than we ever got credit for. And the thing about the wastewater facilities is they get to pick, they get to actually test what goes in the water before they go in and what's in the water after. So we know exactly what the impact is from those facilities. But farms, we don't have that. They have to assume what we're putting in. We have plenty of soil samples and everything like that, trying to make sure we're not having the impact, but they still assume that we're putting a negative impact into our watersheds. And so that's something we've really been focused on a lot lately. And with the chicken litter and the high phosphorus levels in the soil, trying to manage all that, that's been a pretty hot topic lately. Farm Bureau's at the front of that, trying to work with everybody, trying to come up with a good solution.
It's good for whatever it's worth. One of my interviews that I did earlier was with Lee Kinberg at the Elmhurst Watershed Partnership. Talked about, some of his stream bed, maybe some of the impacts. So it's good to hear that from your point of view as well, too, on that. So he seemed like there's a lot of work to be done, but it seems like they're taking it serious. I'm glad to hear that.
Hey, I felt a lot better after talking to people in other parts of the country. So I know a lot of our cities and stuff, there's no way to really minimize some of the runoff that goes into that, or what's running off into our streams. Everybody just needs to try to do their part and take it day by day.
I've asked this question to everybody that I've met with, and it's this: what are your fears for this place?
For the area?
For your area, for your farm, maybe for this community?
It's trying to raise my kids in agriculture is getting tougher and tougher. I'm guessing everybody you've asked this question to with kids is going to say the next generation, and trying to make sure it's as good as it was. But trying to raise, and my kids are very active in 4-H and FFA, as they've done amazing with it. I've been very fortunate that they've taken that in and they've taken front and center and trying to raise great advocates for agriculture. But as we just went through the whole thing, and as we took this tour, it's obvious that the agriculture for them is going to look like different than agriculture than it did for me. And so trying to get them adjusted and ready for that, of what the next 20 years, 30 years is going to look like for agriculture. Is it here? Obviously, with land prices and stuff, my kids, it'll probably be the same thing. Someday they may be driving somebody by the place they grew up on and saying, before we moved out to this big ranch out here, this is where we lived. This is what happened in this area. So I guess the biggest fear for me is obviously my kids and my grandkids. If my grandkids don't get to have a cow in the barn, I don't know what I'm going to do, because the average American's 5 generations separated from the farm. And when we say that, you think from the farm, but what that is, there's a lot of the way of living for rural areas. Rural people just have a different mentality than other people and a different appreciation than some other people. And so every time we've not had to wake up and do chores before we go to school and get off the bus and do chores until dinner time, and then maybe go back out to the barn and check something that happened, or don't get to watch your dad work 24 to 36 hours straight in the hayfield, you start losing a little bit of that mentality of how hard people work and what it takes and what has actually built America. And so every time I hear that 5 generations, it just, that's the part that I worry about, is losing that hardworking mentality that actually built this country.
Yeah, I need to think about that. Thank you for sharing that. There's a lot to process. There's a lot of truth there.
And to add to that, the average age of a farmer is 57 years old. What's the average age for retirement? Just above that. So we're not having any young farmers come into this. It's really hard. A lot of with Farm Bureau, our young farmers and ranchers that's coming in, a lot of they'll come in, they're worried. They're just like, I don't own a farm. And I was like, this is Northwest Arkansas. I don't expect you to own a farm, because unless you had it just given to you, you have it's just not feasible at this time. And farming Northwest Arkansas is going to look different.
And we use the term wholeness. It's really what the idea is. What does community wholeness look like? So maybe if I were to use that term and ask you that question, what does wholeness look like for you within this space?
Wholeness. Like just how a community comes together. Is that what you're?
Yeah, I'll let you define that. Like this idea of wholeness, or I don't even want to use a different word. Like wholeness would be the presence of everything being right with the world, or maybe everything being as it should be would be the concept. And so I think it's easy for us to talk about in our conversations about, yeah, where the challenges are and where the hard things are and maybe what we're losing. And so I think in the idea of trying to think about this idea of if we could define what wholeness looks like or what it looks like to repair or restore or to put these things back together again. Yeah, I'm curious how you would think about from your perspective with everything that we've seen today and just the world that you live in, what does wholeness look like to you?
What was it you said just now? You said the way we think it should be. And I've learned that human nature is to try to justify what you want it to be. The problem is everybody's trying to justify what they want. And that's just if you have a thought in your head, you're going to do that. I mean, that's just so a lot of that, everybody's justifying what they think is right. Everybody's justifying the way they think it should be, the direction we should go. And that's fine. We need to make sure we put those justifications out there and put them on paper and get them to each other, bounce those ideas around and figure it out without losing our tempers and I mean, it's all in conversation, healthy conversation, not getting up at a city community meeting and bashing each other. Everybody come from a different place. Everybody's at a different place in life. And if you don't understand that, you really don't need to be part of the conversation. And we're talking different spectrums, people from different walks of life, people that are pushing for a different thing in life. And so trying to get everybody to come together from different walks of life and figure something out, that's community. Because we wasn't all raised the same. We didn't all have the same parents. We didn't all have the same incomes. I've seen people come from nothing and make something of themselves. And I've seen the exact opposite happen. So, but we've got to respect each other when we're having any of those conversations. And if you don't go in with an open mind and respect for somebody else, that's where we start losing it and things start going backwards. The biggest thing as far as community and trying to bring everybody together with the rural cycling thing, the best thing I heard was my good friend Andy Chastain with the Runway Group. He said, did we lose that with the wave? And so me and him had a complete conversation about the wave. And between farmers and cyclists, you'll see that going down the road. If somebody doesn't wave at you, you automatically, I'm just going to say it, you almost just don't care for that person, right? But if you throw a finger up or a hand up and make it a point, hey, I see you and I respect you, out having a good time, that changes the whole demeanor of each other. And it forms more of a community bond. And where did we lose that wave in Northwest Arkansas? At what point? It still exists. It's still here. And I applaud the cycling community for trying to bring it back in the agriculture community. I know cyclists, if you see a cyclist on the road, you can wave at them between each other. Farmers the same way. If we see a feed truck going down the road or a tractor down the road, we all wave at each other. How come we ain't waving at each other? Two groups bring it together. And it's not just those two groups. Anything we see, just a wave goes a long ways. And so that's what we've talked about, of not losing that old school community feel of the area. And this area still has some of that. It's just whenever somebody moves into this area because they didn't like the area that they came from, you need to leave that area behind and start figuring out how this area is different, how we want it to be. What you didn't like about that area, leave that, come in and start from scratch and smile and wave. It's almost as simple as that.
Wes, Wes, it's just wisdom. I think I could sit here all day and just listen to you because I think in those terms, it becomes very simple that, yeah, we're all human beings. And at the end of the day, we want what's best for ourselves, our kids, our grandparents, or grandkids. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that complicated. And Wes, I'm deeply grateful and humbled to just be able to sit. And thanks for the tour of your place. I've learned a lot and I've got a lot of questions coming away. And thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for being willing to sit down and share your story. It's a beautiful story. And I hope people can learn to wave and that you keep doing what you're doing. So thank you very much for your time.
thanks for trying to get everybody's different aspects out there, and maybe we can all start understanding each other a little better.
I'll say amen to that.
Well, just a big thank you to Wes for his time and his willingness to invite me into his story. His willingness to share his perspective about how Northwest Arkansas is changing is really eye-opening to me, and I can see how in his story, the growth of cities, urban sprawl, and the increasing land prices are having a direct and real-time impact, not just where people are, but also how people live. Wes's kindness and willingness to work with cities and neighbors to meet the challenges ahead is incredibly refreshing. But I walk away from our time together with a much better understanding that the core of it is just good old-fashioned building of relationships, being willing to seek the common ground, and realizing that at the end of the day, we really all do want the same thing. And that's a community that cares for us as much as we care for it. I'll be following along with Wes's story and the work of the Benton County Farm Bureau. I'm glad they have Wes helping to lead their work, and I can say with great confidence that Wes's desire to build community bridges is as real and authentic as it gets. And so for our next episode, I'm going to return to a topic that's been left unanswered. It was the question of where do we go from here on the subject of housing and all the related issues that are connected to it. After my time with Wes, seeing firsthand how urban sprawl is impacting the lives of people and industries like agriculture, my perspective continues to expand to see just how this issue is impacting real people in real ways. Wes and his family's story is compelling, and I can't help but walk away with a little bit of trepidation about how change is coming so fast for our communities. And that's both for urban and rural communities. We're definitely in this together. And then it was also reported on March 24th by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette that the Bentonville School Board was looking to revive the teacher housing proposal that was previously voted down by the Bentonville City Council. I don't know what the next move is. However, I needed a different perspective if this is going to be revived. And in order to do this, I invited Bentonville City Council member Gayatri Agnew to share a table to discuss a lot of things, but to also work through this question of where do we go from here as it relates to housing-related challenges in Northwest Arkansas.
And I actually thought very seriously about not seeking reelection because it's hard. And I have young kids. But what really pushed me to have that decision, frankly, made for me was the relatively recent vote on rezoning land next to Bentonville High School, which would have, if passed, been used for teacher housing. And I've mentioned several times that my mom was a teacher, that I was raised by an educator. But that's not actually it at all. What's important to know about me is I was also raised in an affordable housing public-private partnership. And before I was 5 years old, my family was not in stable housing. And when my mom was accepted into the housing development where I was raised, and that housing changed my life completely. Absolutely. That housing changed my mom's life. It changed my sister's life. And so where you live matters.
Councilmember Agnew voted for the Bentonville Public Schools and Accelerated Initiative proposal, so I wanted to hear her perspective. I wanted to hear all about what she thought from this other side of the table. So in closing, the route for this episode is called, of course, The Farmer. It's a route that leads out west to Bentonville and to follow the roads that Wes Evans took me on a tour of. This is a fun, but it's a longer 38-mile route, and it takes everyone through the story that you just listened to. The gravel is superb, and it's a perfect tour of Wes's neighborhood. Just make sure, as we heard in the story, make sure you wave to everybody you see. Our closing music is going to be familiar to you. However, you may not know how this song has its roots in Arkansas. The song, Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys, was originally recorded by Ed Bruce in 1976. Ed Bruce was born in Kaiser, Arkansas, near the Mississippi River just north of Memphis. Bruce's rendition of this song reached number 15 on the Hot Country Singles Chart, but then later went on to reach number 1 when Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson covered it in 1978. So if you're on Spotify, hang on, you'll roll right into it. Otherwise, go to the episode webpage to get links to the music. And until then, thanks again for following along on this journey.